Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're excited to dive in today to talk about Prime Day, nice and early this year. We're going to give it about one more minute for more people to show up before we get started. Um, Hope everybody's having a great day. We're excited for this topic. It's obviously an important one, and Amazon throwing a monkey wrench by moving up the event and not really giving anyone sufficient advance notice is definitely a complicating factor. So we're going to dive in deep today and give you lots of good tips about how to prepare um, using kind of evergreen Prime Day strategies, but also specifically around the adjusted or new earlier timeline for the event. So give it about 30 more seconds and then we will get started. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jason. I'm one of the founders of Nectar and I'm joined by Harriet. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, welcome. I'm Harriet Carson, our VP of Advertising at Nectar. Between the two of us, both me and Jason, we've spent the past several years in the trenches of Amazon advertising, and Prime Day is kind of our Super Bowl, so you're definitely in the right place. I've spent the past 10 plus years focused specifically on Amazon across sponsored ads, DSP, AMC, also some ops and fulfillment roles. So really just helping brands scale through moments like Prime Day. And today we're going to give you everything you really need to know about winning Prime Day, the actual playbook, the frameworks, numbers, timelines, real stuff you can ideally execute. So, we're not just going over tactics. And while, right now is a little bit late to start preparing, it's not too late to drive an effective strategy too. We'll also have a QA at the end. So drop your questions in the chat as we go and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation.
Yeah. All right. So we will get started. Um, yeah, diving in. So what's different this year, Harriet?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Prime Day is now a 4-day format that has also started earlier than most. It's going to be in late June this year. Here's the thing about the 4-day format that most brands haven't fully internalized yet is that the prep window is actually shorter. And also with it being in June, you have less runway than you think. 4-day format isn't specifically new for 2026. We have seen it in the past, but in the grand scheme of things, it is pretty new where it started, last year. For some data from 2025 Prime Day, 41% of US households are expected to shop the event. It's not a small opportunity, it's a massive number. The question is whether you're going to try and ride it and whether it's implemented correctly. The framing that we use internally is typically, this isn't a sales event you show up for and it's an event you build towards, and distinction and prep is everything. So a couple things that changed last year that we expect to see similar numbers this year. Prime Day 2025 was up 30% over 2024. Every year, this event, it really does compound. More sellers, more ad spend, but also more competition. So if you're planning to run the same playbook you ran last year, you're already behind. The prep window is about 2 to 3 weeks shorter. That means if you're watching this now and haven't started yet, again, you're late but not out. We'll give you the timeline that you should be implementing. 85% of consumers plan to shop with, last year, about half of that actually shopping. And then when you implement DSP with sponsored ads, it drives about a 2.6 purchase rate increase. This is the benchmark for Amazon. I've actually seen it in specific categories be much higher than 2.6, so keep that in mind. Then AMC, it's now table stakes, right? So Amazon Marketing Cloud, it's no longer a nice to have for big brands or small brands. If you're not using it to build audiences and measure incrementality, you're leaving serious money on the table. We've never had AMC audiences for Prime Day before, so you can really leverage them to reach lapsed customers, bid up in your sponsored brands and sponsored product ads to reach users to make your ads more efficient, like new to brand customers. And then, more and more brands are investing in DSP. So leveraging AMC audiences for measurement, obviously, is a very important case. And then there's specific AMC instances that you can pull in order to measure the impact of your pre-launch strategy, your day of strategy, and your post-launch strategy of Prime Day, both on DSP and sponsored ads.
So we've kind of distilled this down into a methodology. So we're going to dive into that. Harriet, do you want to kind of outline that?
Yeah, so we do have a three-phase ad playbook. But before that, I want to ground everything in the framework we call the shop method. So here's really the principle. Ads amplify a well-built foundation, right? They don't fix a broken one. I've seen brands triple their ad spend for Prime Day and still underperform because the listing quality was mediocre or the pricing wasn't competitive or the inventory ran out on day two. Ads really just think of it as pouring fuel on the fire. So let's walk through like the foundation before we talk about ads. Shop method is our framework for building Amazon success from the ground up. It stands for strategize, hone, optimize, and promote. So strategize. Before you spend a dollar, you need a research driven strategy, right? Know your competitors, understand demand trends, nail your unit economics, so your P&L, understand what products you want to push. Revenue looks nice, but profit after ads is reality. We say this to every client: know your numbers before you commit spend. I've seen so many brands do a ton of revenue on Prime Day, but then when you look at the bottom line, they're crushing their margins from deep promos and ads. You should have a strategy well in advance of that day to have a budget for ads and promos to make sure that you're hitting not just your top line goals, but also your bottom line goals. Depending on the category, you might be willing to lose more margins, like CPG, for example. You're kind of making a bet on getting new brand customers in, and then you can track your recurring revenue over time. So again, it's dependent on your brand goals, but definitely have a plan in place for that. Hone, this is about your brand identity. And I don't mean, logos, I mean more so trust. When someone lands on your product detail page, they should feel confident enough to buy. There should be consistent design, a strong brand story, in most cases, a premium feel. We've seen small brands completely transform their conversion rates just by, optimizing their brand presence and redoing some creative. Speaking of optimizing, make sure your listings are optimized for conversions. This is where the conversion either happens or it doesn't. So high converting hero images, A plus content, compelling brand store, SEO and keyword optimization. If your listing isn't built to convert, your ads are just buying traffic for someone else to buy, essentially. And then promote, this is where we come in with ads. When the first three are in place, the ads work much better than when they're not. And when they're not, you're just kind of, in some cases, burning budget. And I will say, this shop strategy, it also works for an ad strategy, right? As well, right? So strategize and like structure your campaigns, making sure that you're bidding on the top terms, and then all the way down to optimizing and promoting.
I also want to add that I think sometimes brands forget about the consumer psychology of the event. Consumers are looking for deals. So when you're thinking about optimizing your listings, you should be focusing on the items that you're going to promo. And, if you're putting your listings next to your competitors and you have your deal, why is your product a better value for the money? Obviously, you're either uh, opening price point, mid level, or premium. And so who your competitors are in your tranche. So focusing on how to position your products with that deal is going to go a lot further than just indexing for SEO purposes and making sure you have all the keywords in your listing, for example. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind when you're preparing your strategy. Obviously, you don't know what your competitors are going to do in terms of the amount, whether they're going to promo certain items, the amount of the discount. But in terms of what you can control, it's really important to account for the consumer psychology. So kind of diving down a little bit deeper here, Harriet, what do you recommend for the SH?
Yeah, so just staying on the foundation for one more slide, because this is where most brands sometimes miss. The reality of Amazon is that most sellers treat it like a list it and they'll come platform. They put up a product, throw some budget at sponsored products, and wonder why they're not winning. The truth is, success starts well before you go live. You need a research strategy. You need to understand your competitors, what they're pricing at, what their reviews say, where your weaknesses are, and really just understanding the demand trends as well. On the brand identity side, think about this for a second in terms of a Prime Day shopper scanning through the search results, right? What makes them click on your product? It's normally the image, price, and the brand feeling, right? It's looking like an end review. So it's looking like you belong there alongside some of the, big players that are dominating the market. A strong brand story with consistent like premium design can make, even a small business compete with those very large brands with more reviews too. And then,
Yeah, and
oh, go ahead.
sorry, moving to optimize and promote.
Yeah, and then
What are some of the key takeaways?
yeah, I would say optimizing is really just about one thing, making sure that every person who clicks on your ad has the best possible chance of buying. So you need, again, high converting hero images, A+ content that tells your product story and answers any objections, brand store that's set up as an event landing page for Prime Day. Make sure you're sending users to the deal page too, not just a generic storefront. SEO dialed in, titles, bullets, backend keywords, all of it. And then the thing about SEO that is different on Amazon from Google, Amazon's algorithm, it cares about conversion rate. So if your listing is weak, not only are you paying for more ads, you're also not moving the needle in terms of your organic rank. The two are deeply linked. And Amazon also ranks products organically based off of not just total sales volume, but incremental sales. So whether you're increasing sales in terms of the market. On the promotion side, paid search isn't just about running ads. It's about, running the right types of ads at the right funnel stages. So using sponsored products for conversion, sponsored brands for awareness and share of voice, sponsored display for retargeting or DSP, and then, also DSP for really full funnel coverage. We'll get specifics on all of this too, though. And
So,
then, oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Yeah. So, just kind of bringing this all home.
Yeah, so how the shop method just maps directly to Prime Day performance. Your strategy work really determines deal selections. Your brand identity directly impacts your performance from your ads and your creative. Your listing optimization determines really your conversion rate on the event day. And then your precision ads are really the engine for the full 3-phase playbook that we're about to walk through. But when all four are aligned, you don't just have a good Prime Day, you have really compounding growth.
Yeah, and so Harriet's referenced this playbook, and what she's referring to is having a lead-in event strategy and lead-out strategy. So what we're going to do is cover how we do this in detail. As a Before we get into this, I want to say that I've seen people in the industry, uh, you give theories that lead in and lead out don't work. Um, I've never seen good data on that. It always has been based on a faulty data analysis. We've seen time and time again that building traffic and before the event and then capitalizing the day of by being strategic and not overspending and then retargeting people after the event using exclusions and things like that. If if they bought other products or bought your product, work really, really well. And not doing this doesn't work as well. And also, when you marry it to consumer psychology, again, we know that people are looking for deals, right? So they also they're looking for deals on products they want. So a lot of people are shopping, basically building their carts ahead of time, or browsing products and seeing what they want to check back on to see whether there's a deal that day. I have a hard time personally just keeping on top of my calendar. If people are going on and browsing before, uh, they can really just struggle to like remember all the different products they're looking at, right? Just another example of why lead-in strategy works. So you've captured them in their audience and can retarget them the day of or after. Or sometimes people are really committed. You have an expensive product, they want it, they want to see if there's a deal, but there isn't. They might still buy it anyway because they're just like, screw it. I didn't get the deal, but I want this product, so I'm just going to buy it. If there's not a deal on Prime Day, there's not going to be a deal. So I just want to preface what we're about to get into, that this works really, really well. Whether you're a brand that's doing 9 figures a year on Amazon or below, we have executed these strategies time and time again with great results.
Yeah, so the 3-phase framework at a high level, we'll go deeper into each one of the phases, but there's phase one, which is the lead-in. The best practice is 4 to 6 weeks out. This is rank building and audience filling. You're not just trying to get ROAS right now. You're investing in position and organic rank. One thing I will say for lead-in is 4 to 6 weeks is best practice, but you should also start implementing minimum 6 weeks, way before actually, your product level promotion strategy and getting your budgets in line to understand what your bottom line needs to be. However, this is not a one size fits all, right? Some brands that are smaller and have limited budgets, they can't really do a lead in strategy that's 4 to 6 weeks out. The majority of the lead in terms of ad budget is the 2 weeks prior to the event. And sometimes the lead in strategy for the 4 to 6 weeks, it doesn't necessarily mean spending more. It could be shifting from conversion tactics to more upper funnel or category expansion because you want to build rank, but you also want to generate more excitement and interest in your brand and your products. And, right before Prime Day, you're still going to get sales, but conversion rates typically can see a little bit of a drop. Sales can see a little bit of a drop because people are holding out to purchase, especially for like premium high priced items. Phase two, the day of, it's 4 days. This is real-time execution, hourly management, bid defense, pacing, real-time reallocation, and using conversion rate as a signal with marketing stream. And then the lead out strategy, weeks 1 through 4 post-event, that's implementing retargeting, nurturing those new to brand customers, as well as that influx of traffic you got on those days. Subscribe and save push. This is the most underinvested phase and often the highest ROI. We've tested this extensively, as Jason mentioned, and brands that allocate across all 3 phases consistently outperform brands that go in, all in the day of. It's really not even close. And if you go all in the day of, more than most of the time I see margins being severely crushed. And a lot of brands don't even realize that until after, when they do a post-mortem analysis.
Yeah, and the reality is that deals drive volume on Prime Day. Yes, there's a rising tide lifts all ships effect, but the better the deal you're offering, the more units you'll see, and then you have to, as Harriet said earlier, really balance that with your promotional spend, right? Because it's a pool of money and you only have so much to not erode your margins past a certain point. And then I think an additional factor we saw last year was there was much more wild swings in terms of pacing, because the event was double the amount of time as compared to historically, which has added another wrinkle or challenge. Is how do you pace your budgets? Obviously it should correspond to the deals you're running and when you're running them or when they're live. But yeah, just a additional complicating factor now that's twice as long. So getting into some of the operational readiness here, Harry, do you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, so just essentially, these are the deadlines for submitting inventory and the deadlines. So just making sure that you're planning ahead. And then we kind of went through this, but creative readiness, finalizing your hero images and your product detail pages. Typically, with deals, just some metrics there is you're going to see a 3.1x in sales lift, and a much higher conversion rate on those Prime days. I don't think that's that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. If you ran strategies prior, you can see much more than a 3x. I've seen brands do 3x and not even reach like half of their potential based on their strategy. So again, it depends on the category you play in and your plan, but 3x shouldn't be the benchmark for everyone.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this is getting into some deal types. So just making sure that you're on top of the deadlines. Obviously, the last slide was more FBA focused, so 3P focused. But here, these are deal submission deadlines. You don't want to miss these, and they are they're coming up quickly here. Another thing to keep in mind is that Amazon has really cracked down on historical pricing, and then your promos are benchmarked to your historical average price. So you want to make sure that you need to think about, if you're running a deal for an ASIN Prime Day or ASINs, you need to think about the historical pricing average, because you could end up making your deal ineligible on Prime Day if you essentially are discounting it between when you submit the deal and Prime Day, and it doesn't meet the minimum required discount. Because you've priced it lower before Prime Day. So essentially, Amazon's looking at your average price on a trailing 90 days. Is that right now, Harriet? or deal price low as 60 days.
60.
And so if you drop your price between when you submit the deal and Prime Day, it could bring down the average, and then the discount may be ineligible. So you need to keep that in mind. Amazon really started cracking down on it last year, and you don't want to get to Prime Day and be like, oh, why is my deal not eligible? It can potentially, it could be impossible to fix or really hard to fix. So just keep that in mind. And then, yeah, Harriet's going to walk us through really quickly, which SKUs to promo. I would say by this point you should have this figured out because of inventory. But Harry, really quick, if you want to walk us through.
Yeah, typically in terms of choosing which SKUs to promo, there's a couple of tactics there. You can look at historical data in terms of what performed best, right? If you have historical data, it shouldn't be just a repeat of the same strategy of prior Prime days, but you should be taking your learnings and using things that have worked. So it's not a repeat, but it's a rinse, refine, and then implement. Margin should come into play. Of course, new product launches. Prime Day is a great time to launch new products because you get that benefit of when a new product is launching within the first 30 days. You get a little bit of a leg up in the organic rank in terms of Amazon's algorithm. You're getting a lot more visibility. And if you implement the right plan with DSP and like awareness, those can be really successful. And then liquidating inventory is sometimes brands use Prime Day, but typically it's going to be your hero SKUs.
Yeah, and I mean, I would always say that if you're trying to liquidate inventory, it's because nobody wanted to buy it, and so unless you're going to offer like a really really high discount, you typically don't see great success with that.
Yep. And then, so with the lead-in approach, really one of the goals here is building rank with sponsored products and sponsor brands and sponsor brand video. But during the lead-in, you really want to push organic rank before the event so you pay less during the event. This is the single most leveraged thing you can do in the lead-in period when it comes to ads. Here's why it works. Amazon's algorithm, it rewards velocity. It's pay to play, as we all should know. When you increase bids on high volume keywords for your deal ASINs in the weeks before Prime Day, you're building organic momentum. By the time the event hits, you're ranking better organically, which means you're paying lower CPCs to show up at the top, because on Prime Day, your CPCs are going to skyrocket. I will say the day of Prime Day, the ranking can be a bit volatile. Lead up definitely has an impact on this, but deals do play more into the algorithm on Prime Day. The data definitely backs this up. We've seen almost 3x impressions versus the July average in last year. This is 2025 to 2024. With the 4-day format, we actually saw CPCs fall about 11% compared to prior years. So it can be a little bit cheaper when you're spreading it out across the 4 days and you're doing lead-in. So here's what to do specifically. Increase bids on high volume keywords for all deal ASINs, prioritize top of search, QA every deal ASIN, and then make sure your sponsored brands campaigns are driving to your store's deal page. I definitely recommend pre-building campaigns where you're pre-building your AMC audiences and you're pre-building campaigns. So you're not, scrambling the day before Prime Day to get things up. Also, AMC audiences can take, in some cases, if you're using a third-party platform, more than 24 hours, but typically it's 24 hours for them to load in the console. So if you do it last minute, you might miss the opportunity. And then, while you're building rank, you should also at the same time be filling your retargeting pools with DSP. So AMC, again, is huge this year. We have introduction of audiences. Think of it this way. DSP is the lead-in, like filling a bucket. Prime Day is when you kind of pour it out. So some DSP awareness tactics are targeting new to brand customers. You can overlay like in-market or lifestyle audiences. You can launch sponsored brand video to highlight key products, features of your brand story. You can use contextual targeting. You can A/B test your PDPs and brand store with DSP. And then for AMC audiences, these are just a couple, but you can target cart abandoners, recent product detail page viewers of your product or competitors that haven't actually purchased, prior event buyers. So if you have a new product coming out or you have a product that people are buying a lot of the time, you can actually target users who bought last Prime Day or last October Prime Day and re-engage them the day of with a DSP ad, reminding them that they might want to add it to their cart. High AOV segments is a great one. And then, keyword searches who did not convert, these people showed intent, but they didn't pull the trigger. These AMC audiences, they're what let you really move fast when the event starts. If you haven't built them in advance, you're starting from zero on day one. DSP spend for us was up 56% pre-event in 2025. The brands investing in lead-in are the ones, setting themselves up to dominate. We saw last year the brands that weren't investing in DSP saw a much lower lift and ended up being much more expensive for them the day of Prime Day.
Yeah, I really want to emphasize that can be a massive game changer in terms of the return you get on your entire strategy and obviously ad spend, because as Harry mentioned, CPCs are way higher on Prime Day, and so are CPMs. And so when you are more intentional about the buyers that you're targeting, and that essentially they have some engagement with your brand already, right? It had PDP viewers or brand store page visitors. They know your brand, or past event purchasers. You're going to increase the likelihood that you're going to convert. So you're putting your money to much better use as opposed to just putting that ad spend towards generic searches, which while they might be relevant, there's a lot of competition on those generic searches during Prime Day. There's other brands running deals. So your ad spend is going to be a lot more efficient and tailored, which means you will get more out of it. As Harry mentioned, we haven't even had these audiences for Prime Day before. So this should be a really big game changer. And you can layer in exclusions like no purchases. Or haven't purchased, which again is just further refining your strategy and making your ad spend more efficient.
Yeah, and creative readiness, we kind of went over most of this. It's really your creative should be locked in before the event week, ideally weeks before. You don't want to wait until like the week of Prime Day to test creative. You should already know what works beforehand, and scale those proven assets. One thing I will say is, if you're running different creatives on the DSP, what you can do through Amazon Marketing Cloud is, say you have a lead-in campaign for the DSP where you're targeting different audiences. You can then retarget those users that were exposed to your DSP ad, whether it's display, online video, streaming TV. You can retarget those users with sponsored display or DSP, or even bid up on the event day on sponsored products or sponsored brand keyword campaigns, where you're reaching those users that have already been exposed to your ads down funnel to encourage downstream conversions, because these users have already, showed interest in some way. Maybe they've just been proven that they've been in the audience, but you can even do people who are exposed and then visited your product detail page and retarget those users. So AMC, there's a lot of ways that you can leverage AMC audiences for this Prime Day. There's really very minimal limits, especially with Amazon opening up retail insights and unlocking organic behavior with AMC now.
Yeah, and one thing which we touched on here, which we haven't talked about before, is just making sure that any of your custom ad creative is compliant. You don't want to schedule a campaign to go live right before and then have it be rejected because the creative doesn't meet the requirements. So making sure that it's in review well in advance of Prime Day, so that if you have to make changes, you can if the ad creative gets rejected, you can make changes in time. So how about budget allocation? Obviously a huge factor in performance.
Yeah, again, budget allocation, just want to preface this with, it's not one size fits all, right? But lead in, we typically recommend 25 to 30% of the budget for rank building, awareness, creative testing, day, and that can be 2 weeks, or it can be 4 weeks or 6 weeks sometimes. Day of, it depends on your life cycle. Day of, it's really about 45 to 50%. I have seen lower day of if you have a really aggressive coupon strategy and you want to prioritize margins. I've seen that be really successful too, and day of be about 20%. It all depends on your goals and the products that you select. But day of, bids are going to be more aggressive. There's more defense, deal amplification. And then post-event, 20 to 25%. You can retarget users. You can do more new to brand remarketing. You can also try and convert users who were first time purchasers on Prime Day into subscribe and save post event. One thing I will say for the day of targeting is the day of, a lot of your work should have already been done. You should have a lot of your interest build. You should have been testing different audiences. Users should already almost know they want to purchase your brand. Of course, a lot of users are going to discover you in the search results if they haven't been served an ad before, but you should have been generating that interest, and like a lot of users should be waiting to buy. And then the day of Prime Day is when you retarget those users to remind them.
Yeah. And so to reframe this, what we're encouraging here is that you think about your budget more holistically, not just plan. A lot of brands, they just plan their budget for the 4 day event. And what we're saying is you should actually, it's like really a couple weeks before the event itself and after, and that should be one pool of money. And you should think about how to allocate that based on what you're doing, right? If you're in crazy high deals on Prime Day or aggressive deals, probably want to invest more in lead in than day of, right? If you're an expensive product, you're not doing much, you probably want to lean more on post event and retargeting, right? Because you're going to get a lot of traffic and you might not convert as well on Prime Day because you're not running a deal. So as Harriet mentioned at the outset, it totally depends on your strategy and circumstances, but you should think about it as a one big pool of money and how to allocate it properly instead of just planning it for the 4 day event. So a lot of questions that we get are, what does success look like? I think a lot of people get anxiety in the lead in, right? We're running all these ads, they're not converting. So part of that is the ad format itself, but also in general, like how should you benchmark, especially when you're trying to fill that bucket?
Yeah, and the truth is, every year I feel like brands and sometimes myself are scrambling per category to understand how the category actually performed. It can take like a week after Prime Day to really get a pulse on, was the category up, was it down? Normally, your Amazon AE can give you that data, and there's third-party sources as well. But these are benchmarks, and this is just across Amazon as a whole. Again, I don't love using a specific conversion rate benchmark because depending on the product, the price, your position in the category, it's going to fluctuate. But main takeaways here is, sponsored products. It is around what we've seen, 60 to 70% of ad revenue on these days. This is your conversion workhorse. Do not neglect it in favor of the flashier formats. It's going to build organic rank. It's going to reach users the day of. Layer in other formats, but don't forget about sponsored products. Sponsor brand video. This is your really highest performing format for, you're going to get really premium placements. Click-through rates typically higher because you're reaching more engaged users. So if you're not running sponsor brand video, you should be. And if you don't have video assets, you can leverage Amazon's Creative Studio. Video is getting better. I will say I've even noticed it over the past week. It's still kind of hit or miss, but I would say like 40% of it is usable now. As of, I would say 2 months ago, it was about 10%. Sponsor brands have the lower click-through rate typically, but important for new to brand percentage, getting users to your brand store. Sponsor display, similar to DSP, reaching users day of for retargeting. Post-event sponsor display is very important, and then DSP is really important for the lead-in. One, category call out, food and grocery was up 50% year over year in 2025. Health products were up 41%. So if you're in either of these, Prime Day is a massive opportunity in food and grocery CPG. So it's a big opportunity to get new to bring customers in and then implement that strategy I was talking about, where any new to bring customers, try and convert them into subscribe and save through the DSP.
Okay, so day of execution.
Yeah, so I would say day of execution really lives and dies by 3 categories: pacing, defense, and then monitoring. So first, try not to front load all of your budget day one. This is one of the most common mistakes that we see. Brands blow most of their ad budget day one, then they're pacing very conservatively on days 3 and 4, which are actually, they can be some of the highest performing days of the event. Day 3 historically has the lowest CPC and highest click-through rate of any Prime Day. Save budget for it. It's really varied. I think Shifting from the 2-day format to the 4-day format has kind of skewed the performance because it's over 4 days, not 2, of course. What I had seen prior was the 2-day format, day 1 typically well outperformed day 2. What I've seen with the 4-day format is day 1 performs really well. I actually saw in a lot of categories the 4th day outperform day 1. So just make sure you're saving budget and you're monitoring pacing. Second is separate your Prime Day campaigns from your really evergreen campaigns. If you have specific ones, you need to be able to see exactly what you're spending on event inventory without it really polluting like your baseline data. And then monitor hourly through marketing stream. If your budget burns out by 2 p.m., you've lost in the evening. Set up a 20 to 30% buffer for your high performers so you can really surge when a product is really moving. I'll also say, if you're concerned about budget, you can implement day parting. It is difficult to know how users like search behavior is going to perform. So on Prime Day, because it's going to be different from your average daily, if you have the data, you can look at last year's Prime Day or like October Prime Day to kind of get a sense of how consumers purchase to day part bids, where there's certain hours of the day where you're spending less, certain hours of the day you're spending more, so that your budgets last longer. Also, you can adopt for some terms a low budget or low bid campaign strategy where you can implement new to brand AMC audiences or other niche ones where you're keeping your bids very low. You're probably not going to get top of search unless those users are within a certain audience pool that have a higher intent to purchase. That's also another key strategy I would recommend for this Prime Day, which we've never had before.
Yeah, these are very tactical, kind of savvy strategies that can really allow you to maximize your ad dollars. So a lot of what we hear is, there's things happen on Prime Day, right? How do you deal with the different variables that are coming at you? So Harriet's going to walk through kind of the decision framework that we use, because you don't really know how things are going to perform, because as I mentioned earlier, you don't know the amount of the deals that your competitors are running, right? You might be running 20%, they might be running 40%, just for example, right? You're not going to sell as well if that's the case, and you need to make some decisions. So Harriet, can you walk us through this framework?
Yeah, real-time decision framework. These are just a couple of examples. There's many more signals that you should be looking at, but these are kind of the top 6. And I'm just going to run through a couple of them. So like conversion rate dropping, that likely might not have anything to do with ads. It's likely, products could be suppressed, buy box, there's a badge issue, competitor has a much lower price and better offering than you. So you should diagnose the problem immediately. The budget's burning early. We kind of talked about this. If you're getting too aggressive day 1, you should really evaluate the conversion rate before pulling back. Again, you should preserve budget for the rest of Prime Day. Some brands that I've worked with that actually have some of the most successful strategies are they don't even allocate a specific budget for Prime Day. Yes, they have guardrails, but it's a tacos goal and a contribution margin goal, so that if they're blowing it out of the park in terms of sales, they might have room to scale budget as long as their bottom line hits a certain number, right? If your share of voice is dropping, it's likely competitors are outbidding. You should, adjust your bids and optimize. Last thing I'll just talk about on this page is if your inventory is moving fast and you're selling ahead of plan, reduce ads, potentially cut it. You don't want to be burning your budget spending on products that will likely run out of stock anyways.
I want to encourage everyone, if you have questions, to please put them in the chat. We will try to get to them and save a little bit of time at the end. All right, so the post-event strategy.
Yeah, so I would say this is, again, the most underinvested and very high ROI phase of Prime Day, which happens after. So the post-event strategy, it has 2 phases. The first one's retargeting. This is where you would target cart abandoners. That's not a typo where we have that 70% of customers on Prime Day leave their products in the cart. 7 out of 10 people who added something to their cart during the event did not end up buying. This is an enormous pool of high intent shoppers that you can reach within 48 to 72 hours. You can even reach those on day 2 through 4 of users who abandoned their cart on day 1. So here's what to do. You can build AMC audiences of cart abandoners. You can use DSP for retargeting or sponsored display. DSP, you're going to have better look back windows, and you can refine the audiences with negatives. You can retarget product detail page viewers who didn't purchase. You can run product detail page viewers of competitors' products who didn't purchase. You can actually now target competitors or users who have your competitors' products in their cart and try and steal that sale at the conversion stage. AMC retargeting, definitely recommend doing retargeting within 2 weeks of the event. It drives an increase in conversion rate of about 11%. It's very remarkable for a retargeting campaign, and brands that maintained support, ad support after the event saw about a 20% click increase on flat spend. So that'll tell you just it's very under leveraged and it's a huge opportunity. Phase two's retention, it's ongoing. So push, subscribe, and save to every new brand buyer. Immediately, subscribe and save is worth typically 6 to 12 times the value of a one-time purchase. So think about that. If Prime Day brings in 1,000 new customers and you convert even 20% to subscribe and save, you've built a compounding revenue stream that really lasts the rest of the year. The sequence that we use is education, cross-sell if it's applicable, repeat subscription. So track your new brand percentage via Amazon Marketing Cloud, understand which of your Prime Day buyers are genuinely new to brand. Those are the ones to invest in retention.
Okay. How do we measure success?
Yeah, I think that, I like to challenge most brands and how they think about measuring Prime Day success. Most brands look at revenue, return on ad spend, unit sales. These are fine metrics, but they're not the right frame. How we think about it is instead of revenue, we overlay contribution margin, like I mentioned. Was the event actually profitable after you account for all costs? If profitability wasn't the goal and it was new to brand customers, what is the average LTV of those customers and what is the repeat revenue we can estimate we're going to generate over time? Instead of ROAS, measure incrementality. Did you drive genuinely new demand or did you just, pull forward purchases that would have happened anyways? Instead of units, we track both, but new to brand percentage, are you acquiring genuinely new buyers who come back? And then instead of sales, measuring retention on top of it, what percentage of Prime Day buyers come back in, 30, 60, 90, 180 a year. And two metrics most brands ignore: organic rank. Did your rank improve post-event? And purchase share. Did you gain category share that you can measure through share of voice, which you get all of that in search query performance on the brand and the product level. It's coming out for vendors. Some of you might have it, some of you might not. It's a slow rollout. And then we've had a CPG brand where, ROAS dipped significantly on Prime Day. By typical standards, that might look very disappointing to a brand, but contribution margin was up 15%, new to brand was strong, revenue was up, even contribution percentage was up, and their retention rate in the 60-day was excellent. So that was a great Prime Day, even though the ROAS number dropped and it kind of told you the wrong story. So make sure you're looking at the full story and all of the different metrics that are going to work together to ensure that you're successful.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Amazon Marketing Cloud. Is there anything that I think we should add about how it can be leveraged to maximize success on Prime Day?
I think that it's really just to make sure you're leveraging it, because if you're not, like, your competitors are going to be. And if your competitors aren't, then you have a huge leg up. But you can really use it to measure cross-funnel attribution. You can, before Prime Day, run measurement analysis through AMC to understand what audiences should we be targeting. So it helps you with your pre-launch strategy to understand who you should be targeting. It helps you with your audience targeting and retargeting tactics to reach the right users and retarget high-intent customers. And then post Prime Day, it helps you with the analysis. So AMC is really going to guide you through every single phase. And if you're using it properly, you're definitely leveraging data that's going to inform your ad strategy. And without it, you're going in blind in some places, to be honest.
So we've outlined a timeline here, which we've hit on. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over this, but you do want to make sure you're submitting your deals, you have your inventory, your creative is locked in, your campaigns are ready. If you miss some of these timelines, you could be in deep trouble, I guess. Are there kind of any last thoughts that you want to hit on, Harriet?
I think we covered a lot of ground. Just the foundation with shop method, 3 phases of the framework, deal mechanism, SKU selection. Last thing I'll say, because I just want to reiterate this, is if you haven't already aligned on a profitability structure and in terms of your ASINs, like a lot of brands, what I've seen, they'll determine what ASINs they want to promote, but then they haven't actually aligned on bottom line goals. You definitely should. I would say 60 to 70% of brands that I've worked with prior to working with, they've seen, increases in revenue on Prime Day, but, they've internally called it a fail because of how much money they actually ended up losing. So just make sure you have a P&L strategy locked in, because it's going to also allow you to pivot and optimize in real time the days of Prime.
It's a great suggestion. Do we have any questions? So far, none have been submitted, which is a first. So either we did a really, really good job, or just have a quiet audience today. But if you don't have any questions now, that's okay. You can also reach out to us on our website, on LinkedIn, if questions arise after. I hope you found this helpful. In 2 weeks, we're going to be diving deeper into AMC, which, if you aren't using it or just starting to use it, it'll be great to attend that webinar. So look out for more details to sign up. And thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you, Harriet.
Yeah, thank you guys.